Marcus settled into seat 1A with the quiet assurance of a man who'd earned every inch of that leather throne. The first-class cabin of Ego Fly EF 2.04 was hushed at 6 a.m. Soft amber lights reflected off polished steel, and the faint hum of pre-fleet checks drifted from the cockpit. He smoothed his charcoal gray suit jacket, the fabric tailored to perfection, and tucked a slim leather portfolio into the seat back pocket. Across the aisle, crystal flutes and caviar spoons sat on gleaming trays, but Marcus's focus was elsewhere. Today wasn't about indulgence. Today was about a $120 million 0-cents deal that could redefine renewable energy on 2 continents. He tapped the armrest, feeling the gentle vibration of the seat's built-in massage function. A touch of luxury he rarely noticed anymore. Instead, his mind raced through bullet points. Target Europe, Q4. Strategic partners lined up in Dubai. 70% shareholder block ready to vote. His executive summary flashed on the tablet perched on his tray table. Every slide was a testament to 5 years of grinding 14-hour days. Data on grid prestige tentatively inked with Gulf governments, and a splashy infographic predicting a 30% boost in ROI within 18 months. But beneath the numbers lay something more personal. A desire to prove that a black CEO could not only compete, but lead in industries historically closed off to him. The memory of his first pitch to venture capitalists in San Francisco flickered through his mind. 27 years old, hands trembling as he clicked to slide 4, projected break even. Year 2, a white partner had peered over his shoulder and asked, "Do you have experience managing large teams?" Marcus had smiled and replied, "Just enough to keep them outperforming every quarter." It was a gentle rebuke that resonated in boardrooms ever since. That same confidence thrummed in his chest now, steady as an engine's purr. As the cabin crew began their silent pre-boarding service, Marcus leaned back and exhaled. He glanced out the window at the runway lights stretching into dawn and whispered to himself, "This is it." With one smooth motion, he opened his portfolio and slid out the printed pitch deck. The first page bore the Brightwave logo and the title, "Empowering Tomorrow, Today." No fanfare, no last-minute nerves, just a deep, unshakable certainty that in mere hours, he'd secure what he needed, and nothing on this flight would stand in his way. The senior cabin attendant appeared at Marcus's row just as the first-class service began. She was impeccably uniformed, navy blazer pressed sharply, hair pulled into a sleek bun, but her smile felt rehearsed. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she said, voice polite but distant. "I'm so sorry, sir, but we've run out of the Australian beef and Rioja pairing you requested." Marcus paused, fork halfway to his mouth. He'd pre-ordered the Wagyu Grey Aussie beef 2 weeks ago, long before boarding passes were issued. He set the cutlery down and met her eyes calmly. "Excuse me?" She glanced at her handheld tablet, then back at him. "The system shows all premium beef has been allocated. We do have a cold chicken sandwich, and still have the vintage Spanish red, a cold chicken sandwich." Marcus felt a flicker in his chest, a tight knot of disbelief. Around him, other passengers were being served steaming bowls of lobster bisque, gleaming silver trays bearing filet mignon, glasses of burgundy. He watched her turn her head toward a white couple across the aisle, her attention shifting in an instant, as though he'd become invisible. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, slowing his heartbeat. "You're sure there's absolutely no beef left?" he asked, voice steady, lips tightened. "I've checked twice. I apologize for the inconvenience." Then she moved on, as if that tiny apology could erase the error or the intent behind it. Exhaled quietly. He picked up the glass of water she'd placed before him, room temperature, almost lukewarm. He swirled it, watching tiny bubbles climb the sides. The cabin's ambient lighting, the hush of other passengers chatting, the polished brass of their cutlery. All of it suddenly felt like a stage, built to highlight his exclusion. He leaned back, masking the frustration that surged underneath. Sandwiched between two empty seats, his tray table bore only that sad sandwich and glass. No napkin-folded white linen, no silver knife. No taste of the Riojan he'd anticipated. Moment, Marcus felt the weight of every glance that had slid over him since boarding. Polite but dismissive, as if his pre-order confirmation, and by extension his presence, didn't matter. He pushed the sandwich aside and closed his eyes, centering himself. He wasn't here for dinner. He was here for business. In the silence that followed, a decision crystallized. This slight, intentional or not, would not go unanswered. No, it would be the spark that set everything in motion. He sat back in his seat, staring at the empty space where his dinner should have been. Around him, first-class service hummed on schedule. Crystal flutes of champagne tinkled, silver trays of caviar appeared at neighboring tables, and the soft clink of utensils punctuated quiet conversations. The lighting was warm. Amber glints off brass accents made the cabin feel like an upscale lounge rather than an airplane. But none of that luxury belonged to him in this moment. His gaze drifted across the aisle to a white couple laughing over buttery lobster bisque. The woman dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. The man raised his glass, toasting the journey ahead. Marcus remembered the email confirmation he'd received hours ago. Premium Wagyu and Rioja reserved for Mr. Reed. The words felt like a promise, now broken. He pressed his fingertips together and exhaled, the frustration coiling tight. Beneath the surface, a quiet anger grew. It wasn't just about missing a meal. It was the part where she looked past him, as though he didn't belong here. He'd climbed from a cramped studio apartment to this polished cabin by sheer grit and vision. Yet with a single shrug, someone decided he was less worthy of the Wagyu his board had greenlit. The same board that trusted him with $120 million, 0 cents. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling the night he pitched Brightwave's grid Sichon model. Investors leaned forward, notebooks open. He delivered his data, polished and precise, and walked away with the largest Series B in renewable energy history. That memory pulsed now as both shield and sword, reminding him he wasn't defined by a sandwich. In his eyes, Marcus looked at the stub of cold chicken on his tray, dry lettuce between two white slices. He picked it up, turned it over, then set it down, untouched. The cabin lights reflected in his eyes as he scanned faces. Not outright hateful, but distant, incidental. Deep calm settled over him. He tapped his smartwatch, fingers brushing its cool metal, and sent a silent signal. Beneath the opulence, a storm was gathering, one that no glass of champagne could drown out. Because this wasn't merely a matter of dinner, it was a statement. He belonged at every table he'd earned, and he'd make sure everyone understood why. He closed his eyes and let the cabin's hum fade into the background. Suddenly, he was 27 years old again, standing in a sunlit conference room in Silicon Valley. He could almost feel the echo of fluorescent lights on his skin as he clicked to slide 3 break. Projected break-even, year 2. His hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of what he was about to ask. $5 million, 0 cents in seed funding to build Brightwave's first grid installment prototype. Remembered the panel of investors, 5 white faces leaning forward in leather chairs. He'd laid out every data point, every chart predicted to revolutionize renewable energy. And then came the question he'd anticipated but dreaded nonetheless. Do you have enough experience managing large teams? The words landed like a cold splash of water. In that moment, Marcus felt something inside him shift, a flicker of doubt mixing with the familiar fire. He straightened his tie and smiled. voice calm. "I've led a team that built 2 utility-scale battery projects under tight deadlines," he said, referencing his first startup out in Texas. "If anything, I know how to deliver results on time and under budget." The room fell silent, not because he'd outshone them, but because he refused to be sidelined. A tall partner scribbled a note, glanced up and nodded. By the end of that morning, Marcus walked out with a term sheet for $3 million. 0 cents. More than he'd asked, straddling both validation and vindication. In the present, Marcus opened his eyes. He stared at the cabin wall as the memory receded, the amber glow shifting subtly on the leather paneling. He felt the same pulse of determination, the same belief that no shrug or snub could ever diminish. The old doubts were buried beneath layers of proof. Contracts inked, prototypes tested, a Series B that vaulted his company to a $30 million 0 cents valuation. Flashback wasn't just a comforting thought, it was his blueprint for action. He realized the slight of a missing meal paled compared to battles he'd already won. Every investor he'd convinced, every board he'd steadied, all spoke to one truth: setbacks were fuel. Marcus leaned forward, hands clasped, breathing steady. The echo of past triumphs lent him clarity. He didn't just belong here. He belonged at the head of the table. The seatbelt sign blinked off. Marcus allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The memory of that first term sheet and the fire it ignited carried him back to the present. He was no longer the aspiring founder of a fledgling startup. He was the black CEO who turned rejection into opportunity again and again. And now, aboard this flight, that same resilience would guide him through whatever came next. He slid his tablet back into its leather folio and eased forward in his seat. He tapped the screen to open his secure investor portal, an encrypted chat room reserved for Brightwave's closest allies. In a single glance, he saw it. A roster of institutions holding 70% of Stratus Air's outstanding shares. Pension funds, sovereign wealth partners, and one boutique aviation-feeded trust, all online already. Scrolled down to the group chat labeled Stratus Blocka, a name he'd coined last quarter when he quietly brokered their alignment. A simple message appeared: vacation funders, Munich Pension, Dubai Energy Trust. Each checkmark meant another heavyweight had signed off. Marcus paused, letting the weight of that coalition sink in. 70%. Enough to force any motion through an emergency general meeting under Stratus's bylaws. Heart thumped with a measured thrill. This was the sort of power that didn't need grandstanding. He drafted one concise note: GM now, seat 1 assigned. Is our trigger, convene within 4 hours. All board members to appear. Hesitated for half a second, double-checked the recipient list, then hit send. Instantly, replies flooded in. Notice, team mobilized. Leaned back, arms folded, and allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Around him, the cabin's normal rhythm persisted. Clinking glasses, hushed laughter. Yet, beneath that veneer, a corporate earthquake was forming. He closed his eyes briefly, picturing that notice arriving on every Stratus director's secure inbox with a single subject line: emergency general meeting notice, immediate attendance required. Remembered how many times he'd sat in investor boardrooms, watching powerful men nod, only to have the rug pulled out from under him later. Not this time. He'd orchestrated those very boardrooms. His phone vibrated. The Legal Affairs Group already had a draft agenda ready, citing bylaw Article 42. A second ping confirmed delivery to the Stratus corporate secretary. Opening his eyes, Marcus met the cabin attendant's gaze as she passed with a refill cart. For the first time, she paused, noticed him, not as an afterthought, but as the man who'd just set in motion a shareholder revolt. He gave her a calm nod, as if nothing was happening. No triumphalism, no anger, just a centered confidence. This wasn't about a sandwich anymore. It was about asserting his place at every table, in every boardroom, and making sure everyone, from seat 1A to the executive suite, understood that power needn't shout to be heard. Cabin lights dimmed as the seatbelt sign blinked off, signaling final approach. Marcus tapped his tablet awake and opened the draft he'd prepared earlier. The subject line read in crisp black type, "Emergency General Meeting Notice. Notice, immediate attendance required." No flourish, no apology, just the facts. Beneath it, he'd cited Article 42 of Stratus Air's bylaws, the clause that allowed a shareholder block holding more than 50% to demand an e.g. scrolled to the recipients, every member of Stratus's board of directors, the corporate secretary, and the legal affairs team. Then he hit attach and selected the PDF titled EGM_call_Stratus_425PL, which outlined documented evidence of discriminatory service and the block's intention to propose a full board re-election. His finger hovered for one quiet second before he pressed send. That instant, Marcus felt an electric charge under his calm exterior. Around him, other passengers were busy adjusting blankets or pre-ordering coffee. The hum of overhead bins being stowed was the only soundtrack. He slid the tablet back into its sleeve, folding his hands in his lap. No one would notice anything unusual. Until every director's phone pinged simultaneously. Later, a subtle vibration danced through his smartwatch. Delivery confirmed. The legal affairs group texted back, "Notice issued, agenda drafted, clerk informed." Marcus allowed himself a slight, steadying breath. This wasn't a flashy power play. It was a surgical strike. From seat 1A, he'd just put Stratus Air on a collision course with its own leadership. Landing gear clicked into place. Marcus watched the runway lights approach. The whispers he'd stifled after Chapter 5, the whispers of "Who is this guy?" and "What just happened?" were now harmless murmurs, because in 45 minutes, the board would convene in Dubai, documents in hand, with one item at the top: their own fate. An attendant approached to collect his empty glass. She hesitated for a moment, glanced at his serene expression, then nodded as if sensing the undercurrent of authority. Marcus offered a polite smile, no triumph, just assurance, and lowered his hand. Outside, the glow of dawn broke over the tarmac. Inside, a quiet revolution was unfolding, announced with a single, unspoken click. Belt sign chimed on, and the cabin lights dimmed ever so slightly. An unspoken cue that Echo Fly EF-204 was moments from touching down in Dubai. Marcus felt the gentle lurch as the landing gear deployed, the hum of hydraulics underscoring the hush in first class. He nestled deeper into his 1A seat, hands folded across his lap, eyes drifting to the narrow strip of runway lights ahead. In the scenes, his tablet had already confirmed that every director on Stratus Air's board had received and acknowledged the emergency general meeting notice. 70% shareholder backing, activating Article 42. A discreet ping on his smartwatch marked each read receipt, 8 confirmations in 30 seconds. But no fanfare, no trumpets. Just Marcus's steady breath and the soft murmur of the cabin. Watched as the flight attendant closed the overhead bins with a practiced glide, then passed by to adjust a gentleman's blanket. Her eyes flicked to Marcus for a fraction longer than before, an almost imperceptible hesitation before she continued down the aisle. He offered a polite nod, his expression serene. Nothing about his calm exterior suggested that, in less than an hour, Stratus's entire leadership would be scrambling to convene a crisis meeting. Outside the window, the desert dawn cast a pale gold across the tarmac. Marcus let his gaze travel from the runway's edge to the vast expanse of empty apron. It felt fitting, this moment of quiet before the storm he'd set in motion. In his mind, he replayed the email subject line one last time. Emergency General Meeting. Notice. Immediate attendance required. A fellow passenger reached for his glass of orange juice, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in the airline's boardrooms. Marcus almost smiled at the contrast. Here, life unfolded as usual. Coffee orders, boarding passes, casual conversation, while beyond these cabin walls, a shareholder revolt was already in motion. The plane touched down with a light thud, soft enough to leave the cabin whisper quiet. Marcus stood as the seatbelt sign clicked off, unhurried. He felt a flicker of satisfaction. This was the payoff for every slight he'd endured, every dismissive glance. No loud declarations, no social media posts, just a calculated move that would reshape Stratus Air's future. He collected his briefcase and adjusted his lapel. Marcus's heart remained steady. The anticipation of their response was sweeter than any celebratory toast. First class had never felt more like the command center of change. EcoFly EF-204 slowed to a taxi on the Dubai tarmac, its wheels whispering against the runway. Marcus stood, buttoned his charcoal suit jacket, and slipped his tablet into his briefcase. As the door hissed open, the warm Gulf air met the cabin, a stark contrast to the hushed luxury inside. First-class passengers moved at a leisurely pace, gathering carry-ons and exchanging polite nods. Yet Marcus walked with purpose toward the jet bridge. Off the plane, he was greeted by the polished marble of the VIP terminal corridor and the muted bustle of ground staff. He paused only to straighten his tie, then continued on as if he owned every square foot. Behind him, the Stratus Air crew, still in crisp Navy uniforms, followed the usual path toward luggage claim, unaware of the directive bearing down on them. Within minutes, his tablet pinged. All board directors acknowledged. EGM room ready. Entered the VIP lounge, its glass facade revealing the curved wings of his aircraft. Plush leather chairs lined narrow tables topped with fresh fruit and bottled water. A barista's station stood to one side, steam rising from an espresso machine. Flight crew and directors trickled in, faces bright with post-flight relief. Their relief turned to confusion when a uniformed lounge manager approached with a tablet in hand. "To read," the manager said, voice steady. "Directors Whitman, Liu, Patel, and the rest of the board have been instructed to convene in conference room A immediately." He tapped the screen, displaying the emergency general meeting notice. No exceptions. Hush fell. The crew officer at the back stiffened, mouth parting. Marcus watched as corporate executives, men and women accustomed to commanding rooms, exchanged uncertain glances. They'd prepared for routine debriefs or champagne toasts, not this. With deliberate calm, Marcus set his briefcase on a console and pressed the button on his smartwatch. No flourish, no speech, just the soft glow of confirmation on his screen. He rolled toward a window overlooking the runway, arms folded. Directors shuffled past, trailing into the meeting room like students summoned to the principal's office. Behind a tinted glass wall, he could see them cluster around a long boardroom table. Some reached for their phones, others consulted aides. The crew, restrained by the same mandate, hovered nearby. This wasn't a standard post-flight protocol. He exhaled, the corners of his mouth lifting in a subtle smile. Beneath the veneer of calm, his heart thrummed with quiet triumph. The silent authority of Seat 1A had reshaped Stratus Air's leadership before anyone uttered a word. In that moment, he wasn't just a passenger denied a meal. He was the architect of a revolution, unfolding in real time. Doors to conference room A slid open, and one by one the Stratus Air directors filed in. White-collared suits, crisp uniforms, each carrying the barely disguised relief that this would be another routine post-flight debrief. Instead, they found themselves seated around a long mahogany table under stark white lights. A large video screen dominated the far wall. The room fell silent as the clock ticked toward the appointed hour. Exactly 9:15 a.m., the screen flickered on. Marcus Reed's composed face filled the frame, framed by the logos of Brightwave Energy and Stratus Air. His voice, steady, measured, cut through the hush. "Good morning. Thank you for convening on such short notice. You've all received the notice citing Article 42 of your bylaws." Behind him, a brief slide titled Board Re-Election Proposal appeared. Against the deck to Slide 2, Documented Service Discrimination, Flight EF-204, Seat 1A, accompanied by time-stamped audio clips and passenger logs. Photos showed the empty steak tray, the ignored pre-order confirmations, and the cabin crew's selective service. A hush spread across the table as directors exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus's tone remained calm but carried an undeniable weight. "This isn't personal retaliation. It's about preserving your brand integrity and adhering to your own rules." Slide 3, he outlined the resolution. "I propose an immediate vote to dissolve the current board of directors and hold elections within 48 hours. Our block, representing 70% of Stratus's shares, will support any qualified candidate committed to equity and service excellence." His eyes, crystal clear, met each camera in turn. "Let's demonstrate that leadership isn't immune to accountability." Murmurs rippled through the room. The CEO, Charles Whitman, cleared his throat. He reached for his tablet but paused, sweat beading at his temple. Other directors sat forward, fingers tapping the table. Marcus allowed a brief silence, long enough for every member to feel the stillness, then clicked to Slide 4. Board resignation form, draft attached. Vote was called, the response was swift. 7 hands went up, almost reflexively. 2 lingered before following suit. Within minutes, the resolution passed. The room broke into stunned whispers, but Marcus's half-smile on screen was all the affirmation he needed. As directors rose, some heads bowed. All understood that a simple act of quiet determination, sitting in Seat 1A, had rewritten their corporate destiny. Stratus Air crew filed out of Conference Room A into the adjacent VIP lounge, the echo of polished shoes on marble trailing behind them. They'd expected a routine debrief, maybe a quick apology, a pat on the back, a champagne toast. Instead, they found a line of station attendants in dark suits waiting to escort them down a narrow corridor to a makeshift interrogation room. Head of the crew walked the senior attendant, the same one who'd handed Marcus a chicken sandwich. Her stride steady, but her jaw clenched. Behind her, the rest shuffled in silence, uniforms impeccably pressed, yet eyes wide with uncertainty. The lounge staff cleared away fruit platters and espresso cups, leaving only a long table and 2 folding chairs per person. Inside the small room, each attendant sat facing a glass panel behind which human resources and legal observers took notes. A tablet lay in front of them, displaying time-stamped service logs, email confirmations, and cabin canvas stills. The lead investigator, a quietly authoritative woman in pinstripes, spoke in calm, clipped tones. "Flight EF-244. First-class service record shows Mr. Reed's pre-order was confirmed 7 days in advance. Yet you reallocated his entree without explanation. How do you account for that?" Silence fell. The senior attendant swallowed, glancing at the tablet. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The weight of every documented complaint. 5 prior incidents flagged in passenger feedback, closing in around her. One by one, the crew was asked identical questions: response times, decision criteria, discretionary service protocols. Each answer felt forensic, precise, and damning, while Marcus, far from the tense atmosphere, sat in a quiet corner of the VIP terminal, reviewing a live feed of the proceedings on his tablet. He scrolled through each statement, noting the subtle shifts in body language, the quickening pulse visible at exposed collars. He didn't need to raise his voice. His intervention, via the shareholder block and board vote, already ensured these moments would have consequences. In the interrogation room, the investigator slid a resignation form across the table. "Per company policy," she said softly, "this is your opportunity to step down voluntarily before we proceed with formal disciplinary action." The senior attendant's composure cracked. Her breath caught. Her tears pricked her eyes. Sighed as the afternoon sun glanced off the terminal windows. Marcus closed his tablet with a quiet exhale. Justice had been served, not with spectacle, but with the inexorable logic of policy and proof. In the hush that followed, he allowed himself a brief nod. The system had spoken, and now the guilty would answer. Next morning, headlines lit up every major outlet. The New York Times ran a front-page story under the banner, "Black CEO's Quiet Coup: How One Seat Sparked a Boardroom Shakeup." Financial Times followed with, "Stratus Air Board Ousted After CEO's Emergency Vote," while Bloomberg featured a deep dive. Inside, Marcus Reed's 70% shareholder block that toppled an airline. On social media, EGM70 and eSeat 1A surged to the top of trending lists in New York, London, and Dubai, with thousands of retweets and shares within the first hour. Marcus Reed watched it all unfold from a quiet corner of his London penthouse. His tablet pinged constantly, alerts for live articles, stock tickers, and investor chat threads buzzing about the implications. Brightwave Energy's own ticker ticked upward in sympathy, up 5% pre-market, but Marcus didn't lean into the celebration. Instead, he closed his eyes and took a slow sip of hot Earl Grey, the steam curling around him like a gentle reminder that calm can carry its own power. Orders called, desperate for interviews. A CNN producer left a voicemail. "Mr. Reed, can we get you on air to discuss your motivations?" Marcus replied via his assistant, "No interviews, all questions answered by the facts and the numbers." His terse statement was posted to Brightwave's press page. No spin, no flourish, just a link to the official EGM notice and a short bullet list of outcomes. Board re-election, policy reform, and a renewed commitment to inclusive service standards. Midday came, cable channels cut to analysts parsing what this meant for both Brightwave and Stratus Air. On Reuters, a headline noted, "Investors see precedent for shareholder activism," and The Guardian ran a human interest piece collecting stories from passengers who'd experienced similar slights. Thousands joined an online Seat 1A coalition, sharing posts like, "I don't sit in 1A, but I deserve respect." The campaign was a grassroots echo of Marcus's own message. Power needn't shout to be heard. Despite the media frenzy, Marcus's office remained calm. His executive team gathered quietly to review new partnership inquiries and stakeholder letters. Over 200 formal congratulations had flooded in, from pension funds to family offices. Yet Marcus declined every celebratory call, choosing instead to oversee the launch of an internal task force on corporate equity and customer experience. Late afternoon, the story had settled into analysis mode. Panels debating the long-term impact on airline governance and discussions about replicating Marcus's model of silent authority. And somewhere between the headlines and the hashtags, Marcus Reed leaned back, eyes closed, and allowed himself a brief smile. No press conference, no grand speech, just the echo of a single seat, 1A that had spoken volumes. He wheeled his carry-on down the aisle of flight EF-409 with the same quiet confidence he'd brought to seat 1A weeks before. First class was a familiar sanctuary, plush leather seats, brushed metal accents, and soft overhead lighting. But today, something was different. As he settled into seat 1A, he noticed a small polished plaque affixed to the tray table arm. "Reserved for change." Paused, fingertips brushing the engraved letters. Around him, fellow passengers adjusted their pillows or scrolled through in-flight entertainment, unaware of the symbolic weight that plaque carried. Marcus allowed himself a slow smile, leaning back into the deep cushioning. In that moment, he felt the journey come full circle. The memory of the cold sandwich and the silent dismissals flooded back, But now those slights had been transformed. First, an emergency meeting, then a complete overhaul of Stratus Air's leadership, and finally a wave of public support for equity in luxury service. Each step had been carried out with precision, without raising his voice or staging a scene. And now, the very seat that once embodied exclusion bore testament to progress. Glanced out the window at the runway lights retreating in the dusk. His mind wandered to the women and men who'd shared their stories online under Seat 1A coalition, to the young CEOs of color who'd written him letters expressing newfound courage. He remembered the small group of service workers he'd met at the Geneva Congress, faces bright as they asked how to claim their space in rooms built by others. He'd told them then, "You don't need theatrics. Let the system show its true colors and correct itself." An attendant approached, offering a menu of seasonal dishes. Marcus folded the menu closed without looking. He had no appetite for ritual. His hunger was for lasting change. Instead, he tapped his smartwatch, sending a brief note to Brightwave's Equity Task Force. Launch Training Module V2. Under the surface of smooth skies, the work continued. Plane climbed, he closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the quiet triumph. No headlines were necessary now. The plaque spoke volumes. When he opened them, the cabin's soft glow framed his reflection. A man who'd shown that true power didn't need noise to reverberate. Belt sign dimmed, and Life magazine's cover story slid into the hands of the passenger beside him. Reserved for change, the legacy of Seat 1A. Marcus settled in, a gentle reminder to himself, and to everyone watching, that justice often arrives not with a shout, but in the stillness of decisive action. And, in that silence, real change takes root.